I'm going to take just a moment to introduce myself. I know that you're a college student that's majoring in education, and part of what your practicum is you're going to have a coach come in and help you as you're starting to make that transition into some of your college courses. Okay, so I've been hired to help you in a coaching type role. That's what I'm going to do. My name's Kelly. I've got lots of years of experience in education, from being a teacher to an administrator, now working with our beginning teachers in our school system. And so I've been contacted by the university to work with some of the students to help them kind of give that real world classroom, what you need to know as part of your college experience to better prepare you when you do get your own classroom and you start the student teaching practicum. So I'm going to be working with you throughout this semester, and so this is our first visit, so I'm just going to kind of go over some ground rules and just kind of ask you some questions that will help me plan so that I can meet your needs and help you to develop into an exceptional teacher. Okay? So tell me a little bit about yourself.
My name is Reagan, and I am a sophomore special education major.
Okay. And tell me about what kinds of experience have you had up to this point as it relates to being in a classroom?
Both of my parents have been teachers, and so I've gotten to be in their classrooms and see their how their classrooms work. I was able to intern in high school in kindergarten classrooms, and then I've done some volunteer work in a special education classroom.
Okay. So what made you settle on special education?
Coming into college, I kind of thought that's what I wanted to do because I worked with special populations at the YMCA doing some lessons. They just kind of stuck with me, and then it really solidified my decision whenever I worked with students in an actual classroom setting.
Okay. And what types, with special education, there's lots of different variables. You can have kids that are in a special school. You can have kids where they're in the most restrictive environment. You can have that setting, or you can have kids that just receive minimal support in a traditional educational setting. I mean, you can have kids who are even hospitalized, and so they receive their education from that avenue. You've got kids that run the gamut from just very minimal service to kids that are very severe and have disabilities where it's difficult for them to be in a regular setting. So looking at special ed, do you have an interest at this point where you would like to kind of land, and even thinking about levels? There's pre-K, there's elementary, there's middle school, there's high school. There's some special educators that even work with adult learners. So have you thought about that?
Working at the school where they are in a separate setting, I really like the older kids and helping them to transition into the real world. Just so the adapted curriculum, just helping them get a foot forward into what they possibly want to do after being in the classroom setting.
Okay. And give me a little bit more of the why that age group, other than just helping them transition. Why do you kind of talk a little bit about why do you even want to work with that population of students? Kind of a little bit digging deeper into your philosophy as to why you think that's where your services would best be utilized.
I feel like sometimes that group of the special populations are seemed almost as the outcast, and it's the job that a bunch of people really don't want to ever do. So just being in an actual classroom setting with them and just being able to connect with students who are disabled, just seeing how they're able to grow, even though I was only able to volunteer for 2 weeks, just watching how those students were able to actually expand their knowledge over just a short period of time.
Okay. How do you think that fits in when you're thinking about education and you think about certainly special populations, what kinds of experiences have you had, or this might be an area for further growth, what kinds of experiences have you had working with groups of folks outside the school setting? Because as you mentioned, you wanted to look at the supports for the transition. Do you have any knowledge about what happens whenever they graduate from the traditional school? Do you have any knowledge of that, or have you worked in any type of community agencies that support that group of people to help them be successful citizens?
I really haven't had any interaction with actually what happens after that, other than just really in school seeing those students who weren't necessarily in a separate setting being employed by like Subway and doing custodial work around the school. But other than that, I really haven't.
Okay. Well, that would be an area of some things that we can look at. So tell me a little bit about some of your courses that you're going to be having this semester. Some things that maybe I could help support you not only in your practicum but maybe some of your coursework. Do you know what you're going to be taking in the fall?
I'm going to be able to do my field experience, so being able to work not actually in the actual classroom, but it's after school programs. It's from all levels, from really pre-K to high school, and if you're in the high school level, doing more of like tutoring or like an after-school program with the younger kids. So I have that class, and then I have an actual online tools,
web tools
kind of class, learning how to use digital media in the classroom. And then I'm taking a communication, science, and disorder class, so kind of getting into more the special ed, like sign language aspect of things. So.
Okay, well, very good. It sounds like some of those classes will definitely be beneficial. I think the thing that will help the most, and I know that your university is pushing towards getting that real classroom experience, just so that you've got a framework to operate from. Because when I work with beginning teachers in their first year, sometimes they seem a little bit overwhelmed, or they struggle with some kind of basic things that I hope by contracting out and getting some coaches that are currently in the public school setting will help kind of bridge that gap from the theory and the classroom, the university level, back to the real school system. One of the things, have you thought at all about how you plan to look at the whole child and look at that from an educational perspective, and what kind of connections you can help build with parents? Have you thought about that, or do you have any ideas for what that might look like?
I think that's one of the most scariest aspects of things. I know that I've gone to a bunch of professional development seminars at school, and that's one thing that a lot of teachers note on about having those strong parent-teacher relationships. Just actually getting to build those is what's most important.
Why do you say that's scary to you? What do you mean by scary?
It's not necessarily scary, but more intimidating than anything. Just, I don't really know,
Well, you used the word intimidating. Why would you be intimidated? Just talk about some of the feelings associated
almost knowing that you have almost 15 students in your classroom, and having 15, 30, even more parents kind of almost on your back, per se, at all times, wanting to know how their students doing, how things are going in your classroom.
Well, that's a good thing. I think you have to kind of do a mind shift on that sometimes. I think you have to view it as a partnership, and, with a partnership and with a true understanding and honest conversation, sometimes mistakes are made. Sometimes You're not always going to agree with everything, but I think as long as you have those open lines of communication and you just don't wait until a bad call or a bad day, and if you start really building those on the front side, I think that takes a lot of that fear away and a lot of that anxiety and a lot of that unknown. So that's certainly something, to think about going forward, and maybe practicing a little bit of that whenever you're even working this fall. Even if you're working in an after-school setting, and let's say that whenever a student's mom or dad or grandparent or caregiver comes in, just walk over, introduce yourself, and just say, I had Bobby Sue today, and I was working with her on her math facts, and she did an outstanding job. So I think it's more about practicing that as opposed to being fearful. So that's one thing that as we go through this semester, is to making sure that you get some practical experiences, because you have to practice those things before you're in that setting, and it's a little bit more high stakes. Okay, do you think that's something that you would be willing to try on occasion?
Yes. I know in PDs, like going back to PDs again, they said don't make every call necessarily a bad call, make a good call, and just say, hey, so-and-so was doing a great job in class today. That helps you actually build the parent-teacher relationships.
Right, because, relationships are foundational, whether you're talking about your colleagues, your peers, your students, your administrative team, parents. You have to lay that foundation, that solid foundation in relationships, or, you're going to have a bit of a struggle. So I think the more practice you get with that, the more at ease you will be. And there's no, and now is the time to take advantage of that, as opposed to when you're really, the teacher with the kids in the class. You might have a mentor, you should have a mentor, but that's still not going to be a substitute for you being the teacher and you being the authority in that classroom. So I think that's important to get a lot of practice. Is there anything that you would like for me to help you with as far as communicating with parents? Do you need something from me as far as like tips or practicing or role playing? Think about that. That's something that you and I can do. I can pretend to be the parent, and I can come in with a situation, and then you have to react in that moment. That's something that we can do. Do you think that'd be a task you'd be interested in?
I think so, yes.
Because again, the more practice, even though it seems a little bit corny sometimes, that practicing is crucial. One thing that you mentioned, your class that you're taking with the technology tools that's coming up, that's a great way to communicate with parents in a systematic, quick manner. I'm not saying, use your own personal information, your own personal email account, those types of things, because it is important to make sure you follow the policies of your school. But I think that's a good way, so I encourage you to explore the options that are available with technology tools. Have you seen or witnessed anybody using anything that you would like to try out from a technology perspective?
Yes. Back to another PD again. I actually went to a technology information session, and they introduced us to some new tools, and I really liked the Class Dojo, how you get like negative points, positive points, just different things of that sort. And then just a couple little different tools here and there. I don't really remember the names of necessarily all of them, but...
What about the class? Does the Class Dojo allow you to communicate with parents?
Yes. Parents can download an app, and they'll get basically a notification whenever their kid gets a positive point or a negative point taken away.
Just that quickly?
Yes.
So sometimes, that sounds like a great tool, but do you see some possible downfalls to that?
Yes. I feel like some people may just rely on that to communicate with parents rather than actually talking to the parents.
Because I could see it possibly, for example, if a teacher overuses it. Let's say there's the negative, then positive, and so either one way or the other. And so if I'm a parent and I'm constantly getting that notification, I think you have to do some education on the front of that, whether that's through newsletters or a parent night or some type of, meet the teacher, open house. I think you have to be very cautious to make sure you communicate that and how it works. Because I do think it could, depending upon the age of the child, and I know you said you wanted to work with older children, but if that's a new program that parents aren't familiar with, I think that could kind of be an alarmist. A parent who's an alarmist, they might say, why is my kid getting all these negatives or all these positives? And they might not understand it. And that might end up actually creating more work and creating not a healthy relationship between the teacher, between you and the parents. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to be very cautious of that and just over-explain, over-communicate appropriately. I think that's a big piece.
And then there's tons of other smart board games or Promethean board games, and there's Kahoot, which is a big tool here currently where you can play on your laptop, iPhone, iPad, and you just have different games or different, like you have a question and there's 4 different answers and you just have to select the shape according to the answer.
One thing to think about, kind of going back to that relationship piece, we've kind of talked about parents and what that looks like and maybe doing some role play there. And one thing to note when you get to have your practicum experiences is be mindful of how the school culture is. And, teachers right now or education majors have lots of choices in jobs and lots of places that they can go and kind of find a fit. What do you look for? What would help you as far as a healthy school culture? Do you understand what I mean by school culture? First of all, let's start there.
Like how you feel whenever you walk into a school?
How you feel when you walk in, that's one thing. That's a big thing. And so it's kind of hard to measure some of those things. But, I want you to, as you're experiencing these practicums, I want you to be in as many schools as you can, whether that's, in the region where your college is, or either if you have the opportunity to do that and, around where you live. But try to expose yourself to lots of diversity so that you can get that feel and what that looks like and where you think it would be a good fit. Just kind of like when you went to college your first time, it's important to get that feel of your friends, to find your group. It's kind of the same way in your first job. You want to find that group or that family type environment where you can be successful. And because it is kind of the teacher's market and the school systems are kind of, all begging for the same quality candidates, you have an advantage. So I just want you to be mindful of that and think about how does it feel. But what are some other things besides feel that you can look for or that you can help gauge you about what makes something a school successful or a school inviting or a school a place you would like to actually work one day? What are some other things besides just the feel?
I would say more so like a friendly staff or friendly administration, just knowing that you're welcome there, not necessarily a hostile environment is kind of...
Mm-hmm. That's one. That's another good point. What else? Here's some things to think about, okay? And this is some things that we can work on. Some of the questions, I think, interview teams and schools are going to ask tough questions of their candidates. But I think it's very fair and very appropriate and advantageous to you to ask questions of them. I would think about what are ways, what is the school's philosophy on communication? What type of support will you have as a beginning teacher? Because that's critical. I know the university level is helping support their new graduates, so you've got that level of support. You should have a mentor that matches your needs, and that I would ask that team to make sure, how do you go about selecting mentors that match what I need? I would ask about, what are the expectations of teachers? What do you want to see in a candidate? What do you value as far as, what do you want my room to be like? How do you want me to talk to folks and interact? So I would ask all those things, but some of that you're going to get outside of just that field. So think about it from the perspective of what can I learn here, but also think about it going forward. How can this translate into helping me understand what I want in a job or what I want in a school, or when I get that offer, is this a good fit for me? Because I think that's really critical. A good fit is important during those first 3 developmental years of being a teacher. And I think sometimes new graduates are quick to take the first job, or quick because they ready to move on, but I think sometimes they might not find the best fit, which creates all sorts of problems. So think about those things as you're getting into more schools this next semester. What concerns do you have about your content? Have you thought about that? If you want to do adapted special ed, of course you have an adapted curriculum. Mm-hmm. Have you had any opportunity or any professional development sessions to look at that and see what that means?
I've not, other than just being in a classroom setting and seeing some of the tools and lessons that teacher uses in the adapted setting. I have not seen.
Okay, so there's something else that we could work on, looking at your curriculum and just trying to, if you're going through to the adapted pathway for license in your major, what has been your experience? And when I'm asking you these, I'm just trying to gauge. It's not bad that you don't know these things yet. These are just things that can help me plan future sessions. What is your understanding of an individualized education plan, or any parental and student rights as far as with EC law and EC services? Have you guys had any experience with that yet, or have you witnessed anything?
I have not had any experience like one-on-one or firsthand yet, but just like hearing almost through the grapevine about IEPs and having those one-on-one meetings with parents. But I've never sat in on one or fully looked at one.
Okay, because that's a big crux of what special educators deal with and what they have to be responsible for, and that legal documentation. And I do know that each school system has their own kind of way of doing things as far as individualized education plans and EC services. However, the state of North Carolina, if that's where you choose to continue, and get a job, the state of North Carolina certainly has certain guidelines that we have to follow, certain laws. So that's something I see as a disconnect when we hire new teachers. When we hire new teachers that are special educators, they've not had a whole lot of experience with the actual writing of an individual education plan, or what strategies can work to meet the needs of Johnny or Susie. And so that's something that I think we can work on in this coaching setting to make sure that you've got a good base and a good understanding of that. Now, this school system over here might do it this way, this school system over here might do it that way, but fundamentally they're all very, very similar because they have to be, because it's a federal and state expectation that certain elements are in each person's or each student's IEP. So that's certainly a goal for us to work on and just kind of get you some exposure to that. Adapted, going back to that, the curricular expectations of that. Do you have to get a minor, or do you have to work on any type of different certification? I'm thinking about children that are served in special populations, run the gamut with their EC identification or their disability. Do you know if the university expects you to have any additional certifications?
On our
plan of
study, it's encouraged. There's some suggested minors that we can choose, but it's not required. But I've looked at like I told you, the communication science and disorder minor, doing sign language and implementing that into my classroom. But it's not really encouraged, but I know that we're allowed, in the plan of study, we're allowed to pick and choose certain classes that we want to take from a list. It just depends on like the semester and what's offered at that time. We can take classes on like the spectrum of autism. I know that's one of the classes that's offered. But
what about with behavior management or kids that have the behavior and the mental
that's part of the curriculum, is a behavior management class.
Okay. I know more and more the state of North Carolina particularly has now implemented that school systems need to look at that social emotional wellness, and just from personal experience, that's a real thing, whether you're talking about kids that are in a special setting or just your general population of kids. So does your university offer anything as far as like outside of just classroom management? Is it truly like a student health management behavior intervention type? Do you have an option for anything like that?
I'm not sure.
Okay, because that's something that I would encourage you to have experience in, because that's a reality of that. And you already mentioned the autistic or autism spectrum type development class. I certainly think that is very much needed for people that are going into anybody, just general education teachers, because you don't have to be serving students in a special ed setting if they're autistic. They can be in the general population. So I think anything like that will certainly help you. When will you take those classes?
They're normally, we can start taking them now. They're not necessarily our major classes, but more the behavior management class are more geared towards our block classes, which is the end of the second semester of junior year and first semester of senior year before student teaching.
Okay. Well, I certainly think that would be very advantageous. Do they offer any type of enriching activities in the summer or anything where you can have kind of non-traditional learning experiences, almost like internships that's different than student teaching? Or can you go and work in a school for kids with special needs or a Special Olympics? Do they encourage you, or does the university have partnerships for those types of programs?
On our campus, we have tons of different clubs. We have over 400 different clubs, and there's another Special Olympics club. And then I'm in a program that we work closely with different schools locally. And so we're able to go into the classrooms for almost service hours, or just like story time with kids, or having that one-on-one contact with students. It's definitely encouraged to get an internship, like student teaching is required. And then our
mentor?
Not mentor, but what?
Advisor?
No. What we're doing next semester.
Oh, your cooperating teacher?
No.
Your internship supervisor?
Yeah, my internship,
okay.
But it's not my internship, but my
practicum?
Yeah, the classes we were just talking about a second ago. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. So it's encouraged to experience those.
Yeah, like with after school, how we're going to have the after school program, how we're going to be doing those, like that's obviously required. And then, we have our student teaching. But then I think we can take maybe a few different classes to have internships, and then there's tons of different places like you can go for your student teaching. Like you can stay up there and teach locally, or you can come back home, or you can go internationally. You can do a ton of different volunteering internship options out there.
Okay. Well, that sounds like I would certainly, again, the more practical, real-life learning experiences, nobody's ever going to discourage you from doing those, because the one thing that people lack is experience, and it's hard to replicate experience. We can role play, we can pretend. You can do that in your college classes, and you can certainly do that with your coach and with your mentor, and even when you have a job, I mean, but it's still really hard to replicate the real thing. So I certainly think any opportunity you have to do that would be of great benefit to you. What is your biggest fear? Let's pretend that, you're finishing up your classes, you've got all these experiences. What would you, at this point right now, what do you think is your biggest area for growth, or area that you think you'd like to learn more about at this moment?
Like being a first year teacher, or?
Yeah, just pretending like at this moment, if you think, I want to make sure I know how to do this, or I want to be better at, what is it that you would like to know right now moving forward?
One of the things that's kind of like drilled into us, like in our classroom, like in our like classes, and then in different PDs that we attend, is classroom management. Like I know that's the biggest like key to like a successful classroom. Just like implementing like how you want your classroom to work on day one, and making sure that like day one's the most important day.
Mm-hmm. I would very much agree with that. Okay, having said that, and these are things that we can work on, having said that, let's say here it is, almost July. You've been offered a position in August. It's in the perfect school. It's the perfect classroom. You are ready to go. You're so excited. What does your classroom look like as far as from a classroom management perspective? If you've got the most perfect pie in the sky classroom setting, your room is ready to go, what do you think is important for the kids to know and for them to understand so that learning can occur? So think about it. What is your discipline philosophy? What is your discipline style? Or your management style as it relates to classroom effectiveness? Have you thought about that?
Not really, but like I know, like in kindergarten, like they had the bands. So knowing like if you talk out of turn, or you're out of your seat, like I know that's very like elementary, which I mean special ed, they are kind of elementary as well. But
okay, well think about that. So reflect on teachers you've had. Okay, reflect on teachers you've had. What made the teachers that were good teachers? Why were they good teachers compared to teachers who weren't real good? You've had a not so good one. So what was the difference as it relates? Think about classroom management.
In my mind, a good teacher is up in front of the classroom, not necessarily up in front of the classroom, but like up and moving around the classroom, making sure like checking in on students, rather than supposed to like the bad teacher just sit to their desk all day long and like plays on their phone or messes on their computer, or like grades work late and gives it back to you like a month later.
Think about the environment. Think of classroom management's also about the environment. You mentioned from a kindergarten perspective a while ago, kids out of their seat and kids talking. Okay, think about that. Now, if we're going to talk, let's talk about elementary kids or even special needs kids. Okay, who act a little bit, obviously developmentally, a little bit more elementary than their typical age. Okay, how would you convey to kids, when can you talk? When can you not talk? So those are some things that you have to think about. When can you get up out of your seat? When can you not? So what is that going to look like? How will you greet your students when they come in? How will you tell them, or how will you show them, or how will you involve them in that process?
Gonna like
of creating your environment.
Whenever I worked with in the special needs like school, the teacher, she was standing at the door and would give like a high five or like a hug. It's like, oh, good morning, so and so, or just almost having like a welcoming environment for the students to come in, and like they already had their like routine already down.
But okay, let's stop right there. I don't stop right there. Do you believe that was a good way to greet students? Is that something you would like to replicate?
Yes.
Why?
Because it almost made them feel special, that they were being recognized, and it was almost like kind of a line to get to the door, and so their peers were able to see like, oh, like they're getting a high five, or they were like happy for their friend because they got a high five or a hug or a good morning.
So that's a very simple way to establish a positive culture in your classroom. Kids know that they're valued, and immediately that helps to foster and develop that relationship. Now, kind of going back to how are kids going to know when they can talk, when they can get up, where do they turn in their work, what do they need to do to leave for the day? So those are things, those are some things that are procedures, okay? Because there is a difference between rules and procedures, and I think beginning teachers get tripped up on that a lot. So rules are things like keep your hands to yourself.
Yes.
Don't run in the hallway, because you know why? There's usually a negative consequence. You're going to get hurt. You're going to hurt somebody else. But now how you turn in your work, that's not a rule. Do you see the difference? That's a procedure. And so rules, you'll just have a few. I think that's one of the things. But those procedures are things that can make or break your classroom. So as you are observing in effective classrooms coming up this semester, and you're getting some of that practical experience, notice how those classrooms work. And start building your own tools, your own bank of, I really like the way that teacher managed blah, blah, blah. And if I were you, whether you're a technology person or just an old-fashioned notebook, I would start making a list of those effective practices. Master teachers make it look effortless, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult to have those established. And so I think sometimes when you're a new teacher coming in, you kind of take for granted that foundational piece that's already been laid, and you just think, oh, well, my classroom's going to work just like this. But there's a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes that's not very visible. So that's why I want you to be mindful of that, okay? Well, our first session is coming to an end. I'm just going to kind of recap a little bit, and we're going to plan kind of some things for our next session, okay? So I've got an understanding of what you want to do. I've got an understanding of some experiences that you've had. And so moving forward, I would really like for us to work on what you believe about kids and what you want your environment to look like. How are you going to set that up? And how does that all work, in connection with understanding your curriculum, understanding your students, making those good relationships? Do you sound like, is there anything you would like for me to focus on outside of some of those big ideas?
I think those are good ideas to start with.
And that's certainly open for change. That's not a hard, fast rule or an agenda that we have to follow. But by talking with you today, I've gotten some good ideas on some things to help you, to help coach you, to realize to be that outstanding teacher that you want to be and that you desire to be while you're still learning, and so helping form that as you're going along, as opposed to waiting till day one when you're ready to start your own classroom and you're kind of at a loss for some things. So is there anything else you would like for me to know or that we didn't cover? You feel good about everything?
I feel good about everything.
Okay, so you feel like you understand what my role is?
Yes.
That I'm here to help you, I'm here to coach you, I'm here to support, I'm here to grow, I'm here to do all those things, because you have these things inside of you. You've talked enough about what you want to be, what you want things to look like. I just need to help you see what you have and kind of make a little plan for some of these things, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you next time, and I'll be in touch with you.
All right.
Thank you.